Hi, welcome. I'm Julie Phelps. I'm the Artistic and Executive Director of Counterpulse, located in Yelamu, also known as San Francisco. I'm actually calling to you today from the lands of the Washoe people. Really thankful to be able to be here in the Lake Tahoe area and thankful for the land. Today we are here with Dilate Ensemble and Sarah Weaver. I'm really excited for the conversation. Also a partner in crime, Ellen Perlman, is joining us as well and will be participating. Um, we will have time at the end if there's questions, so you can tap those into the chat bar and I'll be monitoring that. And I'll also be sharing a bunch of content and links there as well, so keep an eye on that. Thanks for joining us, and over to you, Ellen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ellen Perlman, Director of ThoughtWorks Arts, and our most recent artist residency was and is on the issue of networks. And the network has changed tremendously in the past 2 years, and Dilate Ensemble became a creative collective at the start of the pandemic. And through their residency, they explored how to push the boundaries of telematic networks through hybrid performance. Cantina is their powerful response to these investigations. The performance, which you'll see excerpts of, is a non-looping visual and densely textured sound experience where performers and audience members explore live streams from two completely different physical spaces inside Counterpulse's Tenderloin building in San Francisco. Because of the pandemic, which threw many loops our way, some of the sound and movement performances took place remotely, but were seamlessly mixed live time to create a specialized environment. Cantina explored what the imprint of a physical space and the bodies within can be. Dilate Ensemble was able to build a customized network during their 16-week residency, which linked different locations in the Counterpulse building. Their feeds were sent to electronic musician Scott Miller, remotely based in Minnesota. Sonic variables such as amplitude, frequency, physical characteristics of the room, speaker placement, or microphones impacted simple behaviors and produced complex layered outcomes. Excuse me. Counterpulse's upstairs studio and dedicated project space in the basement were animated by the audio-reactive video projection installations of Carol Kim. And for this event, Dilate Ensemble was also joined by special guest dancer and choreography expert, Shinichi Iova Koga. I hope I said that right. So Dilate Ensemble exists of Carol Kim, who did the video installation and direction. Yeah, good. Wave when you're introduced. Gloria Damijan, I can't say it right. I'm so sorry, Gloria. From Vienna, who did extended toy pianos and percussion. Scott Miller from Minnesota, who did the Kaima and the electronics. Louisa Muir from New York, who did voice, and John Raskin, who can't be here today, who did sax, concertina, electronics, and recycled materials. Introducing an expert into this dialogue is very important for us, and so we have invited Sarah Weaver, PhD, a New York-based contemporary composer, conductor, technologist, educator, and research working internationally as a specialist in large ensemble and network arts. Her work innovates contemplative concepts on network synchronicity, synthesis, and interconnection for artistic and social purposes. Weaver has composed solo, chamber, and large ensembles of groundbreaking musicians for 25 years, integrating influences of classical, jazz world, contemplative, electronic music, and individual music languages of performers. She is an innovator in network arts, advancing live performance via the internet by musicians and artists in different geographic locations. Weaver is also director of NowNet Arts and Sarah Weaver Ensemble, executive director of the Jack Tripp Foundation, editor of the Journal of Network Music and Arts, JOMA, and faculty of the New School College of Performing Arts. So with that, I hand it over to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Ellen, and Dilate and Counterpulse and ThoughtWorks. I'm very glad to be here, and I'll be giving an introduction to the network arts field and some work I've been involved in the history of network arts, and that will lead into a panel conversation with Dilate on a number of these topics more specific to their work. Let's share my screen here for some slides. Okay, so our topic here is network arts. So again, my name is Sarah Weaver, and here are some links if you'd like to look further into this work. So I'm a composer, conductor, technologist, and researcher. And as mentioned, also the director of NowNet Arts, the director of the Jack Tripp Foundation, and also editor of Journal of Network Music and Arts. And these links here can give you much more information on all these areas and resources if you want to look further into network arts. Contemporary network arts. This is live performance via the internet by artists in different geographic locations. So artists are performing together also in the same geographic location using a shared network could be referred to as network arts. Also arts installations using networked machines. For example, if you had Ethernet cables connecting different machines that are in the same space, that could be considered network arts. And also hybrid forms, or mixed reality and virtual reality. So there's a number of terms and situations where a performance could be considered to be networked. So a little bit more about the terminology. In network arts, it's a comprehensive term for several subfields, which could include telematic arts, telepresence arts, distributed performance, co-located performance, internet to events, or internet arts. And as we'll talk about a bit later, there are more terms and distinctions that are currently in evolution. There's a related article, if you'd like to look into this a bit further, by Eric Lemon. So telematic music versus networked music, distinguishing between cybernetic aspirations and technological music making. And this is in our Journal of Network Music and Arts. And a bit about my organization, NowNet Arts. This is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization founded in 2017 to produce and present contemporary network arts works, technologies, education programs, and publications. Network arts utilizes the internet and related technologies as an artistic medium for works created for this platform. And there's a bit more history there as well. So a bit of history about network music ensembles they've been involved in. So this is since 2006. These are early concerts with Pauline Oliveris, one of the pioneers of this field, and together with Chris Chafe, who developed the Jack Tripp audio network audio technology that we use even today. And here's some of the locations that were involved in those early days. And in 2007 and 2008, we had telematic circle seminars and concerts with some of those same people and places, and then also adding Mark Dresser and Shirok Yadagari over at University of California, San Diego. And that was a really formative year to synthesize this work. And then 2009 to 2011, we started to branch out into international seminars, concerts, and symposiums, and also working together with the United Nations representatives. We're doing network concerts and artistic projects for peace since we're working internationally. And in 2012 to 2018, focusing back in more to composers projects, and with a lot of people listed here and international collaborators. You can see some of the sites we were working with there. And into more recently, 2017, 2019, so that was the founding of NowNet Arts, the NowNet Arts Conference, the festival, the series, this Journal of Network Music and Arts, and also the Jack Tripp Foundation. And 2020 to current, working more in virtual and hybrid works. Okay. And a brief summary of the technology. You can see some of the progression here that we're using. So Jack Tripp has been a constant that in the work that I've been involved in, and the video conferencing has evolved. Also, our approaches to web streaming and recording in this medium. So in the early days, there was a lot more hardware that we had to use, and eventually some of that became operable on computers. We didn't need dedicated hardware, but there's been a big evolution here that continues. And obviously in 2020 to current, there's a lot of technology that had to be adapted to run from home and public internet. And a few photos from the early days. Some of our projects, and you see these are hybrid projects where we had performers in different locations, and the sites were connected to each other, and we would perform together. So some of our work at the United Nations up there. This was from the 2018 NowNet Arts Festival, and some other projects as well. And the NowNet Arts Ensemble, this is feature contemporary musicians and media artists in New York and locations internationally performing together live via the internet. And some more recent photos where you see that we're performing from home online. And we also have presently the NowNet Arts Hub. So this is an international virtual contemporary audiovisual performance group in partnership with Experimental Intermedia and Harvest Works Digital Media Arts Center. And the Hub had a performance earlier on today involving a couple of people in Dialate. And it's been a real pleasure to develop this group during these past couple of years. It started out as the NowNet Arts Lab Ensemble, and this has evolved into a professional performance group. This early days photos, and this was actually from earlier today. And just a bit of background on our conferences. This started in 2018, though there were a number of symposiums and events that happened before this, but this is more specifically Network Arts Conference and through NowNet Arts. So we started in 2018, more focusing on being able to utilize the public internet besides the private internet, since the technology at that time could only really run on research level networks that had very high bandwidth and quality control. So we're working to evolve the technologies to also work on public internet, and also working with social purpose and network arts and social distance, capacities and innovations, transformation of distance. And we'll have another conference this year that will be announced soon. And you can see the different structures that we had. So we've always been a hybrid conference, and the past 2 years have been entirely remote, and we're aiming to return to hybrid this coming fall. We also have the NowNet Arts Festival, and this is an annual event that features premieres contemporary network arts works by multiple artists for the NowNet Arts Ensemble and collaborating groups. And the works are performed live via the internet. So you can see our locations in 2018 and 2019, and that's when we were connecting site to site again. So Then in 2020, 2021, everyone was connecting individually from their many different locations. So we'll see what happens later on this year. And we'll talk about network arts properties. So there are definitely time dimensions to consider because you're going across distance, which has a physical reality of causing latency just due to the speed of light and other factors. There's spatial dimensions where you're in different types of physical and virtual spaces. Pluralism, nodes, systems, and technology-mediated transmission, and multimedia. So there's a lot of different types of properties to consider. And compositional topics. So from those considerations, might think about different types of music notation, graphic notation, text notation, improvisation, sonification, conducting gestures, and different types of concepts and strategies and intentional tunings that have been developed in this work, very particular to this medium. And this overarching concept of synchrony came about, especially since we cannot have a steady beat like you may have in a local space. We think about the perception of synchrony as the alignment of distributed time and space components. So that's what becomes most important for being able to play together and hear it as live. So the perception of synchrony becomes key here. So we have expanded systems of time, pitch, and nodes, and different ways of working with latency. And some of these terms you can see are not necessarily specific to network arts. They are also occurring in many different styles of the arts and periods of the arts. So this is a lot of these techniques are not new, but we can develop them for this type of medium and work with synchrony. And thinking of steady beat and mixed meter and meter fragments as local. So you could have people in local space working with that together with the people in remote space working with a different time plane. So thinking of steady beat as local. And also just being careful with long tones and drones, especially if you're working with the technology on new networks and checking out the quality. Okay. And there's a research paper here that can point you to that goes much more into detail about these different properties and how they've been utilized in performances and compositions and projects from 2006 to 2019, and there's a link there. And I'll mention the journal is open access, so anybody can read the journal. Okay, and there's also recording that's made for those pieces. So it's a compilation album 2011 to 2019 of particularly my contemporary music pieces for solo, duo, large ensemble, and network music ensemble. And I particularly point this out also, since we'll be talking with Dilate in a bit, that these concepts can also be applied to settings that are not network music. Right, so the metaphor of the network and structures of network can take place in these different types of settings in addition to network arts, and that to me also helps to connect this to the broader art scene. Right, and I'll be really interested to speak with Dilate a bit more too about their ideas along these lines. And I have a new body of work in development called the Synthesis Series. So we've gone from synchrony to synthesis here. So building on synchrony as a state for synthesis transmission. And working with new configurations and also intermedia. So there's these pieces that are titled Integral Infinity, Isomorphic Now, Interpolation Space, at the intersection of eternity and time, and deep field synthesis. So these pieces have been developed in the past 2 years or so and are being set to record this spring and release later. So be happy to share more about that later on this year. and the network arts future. So thinking about wider exposure and access. So the short-term ubiquity and longer-term artists. So as we've been speaking about, there's been a lot of attention on network arts during the pandemic times. There's been this short-term ubiquity, somewhat out of necessity, but then there's also longer-term artists that were involved either before or got involved recently and continue on as an authentic medium for their work. Integration of network arts and physical arts. So again, working more in hybrid forms, but also network arts metaphors that may also carry over into physical arts forms. Institutional support. So, for example, the Jack Tripp Foundation is a recent development, and different institutions like this that are getting more involved with this medium. Sustainable online venues. So there's a number of online venues that have popped up either in connection with a physical venue or existing really as its own online venue, and working to make those sustainable for the artist performances and projects. Refinement of video and recording. So there's been a long history, at least in the work I've been involved with, that works great with audio and has integrated video and also recording, but there's really a lot to continue to develop, particularly in those areas. And you think about recording a multi-location event and then presenting that as its own recording. There's really a lot of different factors to get into there. And also the pandemic influence on network arts and network arts influence on arts aesthetics. So since there's been a big focus on network arts during the pandemic, there's definitely an influence of going through that type of event together and how that may influence the medium. And then also, since many people have gone through network arts, then how that may influence other arts aesthetics. Having passed through network arts, for example. Okay, and so that's been an introduction about network arts in the field. So thank you very much, and really looking forward to speaking with Dilate today about their wonderful work.
Aik turin, mestan, tikiti, barnutar, eukoriaseni, vosta, ikudrias, eukoriaseni, quasida, vosta, ikudrias. Wasida
Thank you. And I believe we're passing back to you, Sarah, yes, to facilitate this portion?
Yes, yeah. So it was wonderful to see again the excerpt of your performance, and I have a number of questions to open to the Dilate Ensemble. So a first question is that I know you're a new group to be working together in recent times, and why were you drawn to work more in this medium and work as this group together?
Well, Carol should answer
Yeah,
first.
Carol can answer.
Carol is really the, I don't know, the
Initiator.
There
Yeah.
needs to be an emoticon that says "Take it away." Okay. Okay. So it's wonderful to have Sarah in the room because that's where we all met. Okay. So we all showed up right when the pandemic hit into this large Zoom grin, just looking at each other and just wondering, can we play music together? Is this possible? Sort of thing. So, and it was from participating in her NowNet Arts large ensemble that we extracted our smaller group to work with a video installation. So that's our home. Those are our roots, you know. And for me personally, I was so relieved and delighted at the same time that to find that we could connect so intimately, and definitely continue doing interesting work that not as a replacement because we couldn't get out there, but really as an opportunity to explore new possibilities. That's how it felt to me. So like, so to look at networked online collaboration, yeah, as an opportunity and not as not focus on the limitations. So for instance, I love your definition of synchrony and how you can explore that, because it falls in line with this embracing of latency and everything that the internet has to offer up at any given point in time. And so if it's more of a synchronous alignment of intention or longer arc, as opposed to fixation on a specific moment in time, I think that's beautiful, because that just releases you from, wait a minute, but we're not like landing on this point. It's like, okay, you're not landing a point, but you're landing on this broader kind of gesture, maybe. But can I just keep morphing into maybe another question? Because I'm loving how you sort of very succinctly covered a lot of ground, and there's so much we could unpack, Sarah. But I want to start here. So Dilate Ensemble emanated from the onset of the pandemic, and it meant that we were all in our home locations. And when I look at earlier telematic performance, it was usually venue to venue. So public space to public space, and so it was all about how can you sort of capture enough of the presence from elsewhere and bring it in somewhere else, right? What we're encountering now, because this project with Counterpulse was the first time we engaged in a physical space. And then of course, the pandemic just threw all these curveballs. So we couldn't have a live performance, but this whole question of coming from this really private single node in headphone space, and then possibly trying to bridge out to both this space and we imagine audience being present with a live musician in one of the nodes in Counterpulse. And the question was, can that musician play in a way that's musically satisfying and successful to both the networked experience and to a live audience in the space at the same time? So it's a different kind of synchrony that we were questioning, is this possible? And we never got to really test it out since we didn't have a live audience. And so it's, we throw out the terms hybrid and we throw out, but hybrid, has so many flavors, and this is one flavor we've asked that question, and I'm still asking that question whether it's a good idea. It's just like in teaching, is it a good idea to teach live in front of a classroom and online at the same time? Maybe not. Maybe hybrid is really the fact that we have to switch on a dime and be live one moment, and Louisa, you just taught a workshop, jumping from one to the other. Is that the hybrid that we're really dealing with right now? So I guess start maybe with that question of how does the pandemic affect this form, this networked arts? Well, it started because we're all what's the word I'm looking for? We're all in our home little pods instead of big pod to big pod, or a big pod bringing in one person or something like that. It seems different to me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you're speaking about public space versus private space too, and that's a factor. Mm-hmm. And the state of mind the person may be in, or the equipment they may have available, or the type of setups they can do. But then also, you say we're in the headphone space, when there's not a physical space involved that has more than one person. Yeah. But as I was showing in those photos, there's a long history of the hybrid work, and to me it was more of a hovering of attention, and that was the skill to develop. So being able to be present both in the physical space and with the remote participants and remote space. So there was a kind of hover of attention to develop, which is different than if there wasn't a remote presence, how you may be interacting in the room. Yeah. So I imagine that was a big leap and we saw the pictures of you also in the opening of being together in those spaces, and then how that worked out in the clips of the performance too, right? So you're seeing the dancer rolling down the floor in a physical space there, but nobody else is there also. That's to me, that was another type of variation, that they're in a physical space that you see rather than the close-up, but also it looks like he was the only one there in a space that would normally have more people in it. Yeah. So, did anyone else in the group want to answer that question more about what brought you
Sure.
into this? Yeah.
Well, I think it's important in this instance for Dilate Ensemble that we did not exist as a group prior to our manifestation as a telematic ensemble, and so there was never this sense of trying to recreate something we had lost, or while we all have our individual histories, our collective history is unique to this moment, and that I think that's been very liberating in a lot of ways. Certainly, the more that I've learned about the history of network arts, the more I realize that we're dealing with a lot of the same issues that have been confronted in different ways for 50, 60 or more years. And I guess, I don't know, it could be disappointing that there's still needing to be wrangled with, but on the other hand, that means there's plenty of stuff to do, including our take on this approach to a hybrid manifestation or realization of our work. So Katina represents actually the first time where we tried to do a thing where we already had an established history of performing together and a repertoire that I think was really defined by who we are and the way that we work, and then we started dissecting that and trying to find something new at Counterpulse.
Hey, go ahead, Louisa.
Yeah, no, and I don't know if that's still your question or already heading into something else, but I do think it's important to mention, because so many people were asking me about this, the fact that even though this was pre-recorded because we couldn't do a live performance, when we were making it, when we were creating it, it was all live and in the moment. So there has not been. So the movement, for example, the projection of me moving was a live interaction with the physical dancer in space. So in a way, I wasn't like, post-production-y put in there or something. And then, it was all in the moment, really a live setting, which brings with it a lot of advantages and a lot of difficulties. And so actually dealing with those elements, and even the sing, like for me, in my case, the singing was also live. So it was singing and moving and interacting with the person and interacting with Carol's visuals all at the same time. It wasn't a post-production thing in that sense. So that's I think interesting to take into consideration. Of course, we had to edit in regards to the different angles and so on and so forth, and there was some audio glitches and so on. So. But other than that, like the creation of the piece was still live. And I think that's what makes Dilate, to me at least, because I was not a network artist at all before. I'm a very in-person, physical person. So when this whole thing happened, I'm like, okay, what do I have to do to keep living? What do I have to do to just keep making art? I'll do anything. Just give me whatever we can do to keep working. And so I was so grateful for finding you and for also what we've been creating here. And so, yeah, but the in the moment element to me as an artist is crucial for me to feel constantly being engaged. If that element was gone too, I think that would make a huge difference. And I think that it also reads for the audience, and that's what keeps the audience also engaged, is this element of, oh, they're doing this now, this is happening. So that's what's exciting, I think,
Yeah, I want to add to Luisa. So totally the same experience I had back in March 2020 when everything was shut down due to the pandemic. I also had this question, okay, how can I continue doing live art, live performances, live music in a high quality? And it was really helpful that all these network technologies had been developed beforehand, but this pandemic really was urgent to push them forward and to take them in front of the curtain and show up with them and what they can deliver, quality, sound quality. And it was extremely important to have a good sound quality, really to feel a connection to all the other people and also to connect to the visuals. So all this together was a good instance to start working. And yes, in terms of Katina, I just want to add these hybrid settings, hybrid technologies. What you have to take in consideration is that you have to deal with multiple realities. Also, when you're in your single note performing, you all have your own reality, and maybe the other one is not 100% aware of your reality because you're not in the same physical space. So this is something also interesting to work with because this takes more influence into the outcome of an artwork. Also these different notes, how you're behaving in the different notes, also in terms of improvising and to make more progress in this hybrid performances would be a future thing to really work more on setting up these different realities an audience has in terms of hybrid performances. So this is something I think we want to push forward, and it's something for the future.
Great. Yes, it's wonderful to hear your thoughts on the experience and what makes it so connective. What are those factors? Yes. And I'm also curious along these lines about your experience as an artist and then coming into this medium. Do you feel that it's an extension of work that you would do also locally? Like, for example, would you do this piece locally, maybe not the same way, but maybe with some of the same inspirations or structures? Or do you feel like this has been a much different experience from your prior work?
Well, I can say very quickly that the approach to programming the processing of sound in this comes out of the work that I've been doing for the past almost 20 years, which is called ecosystemic. And the term system in there actually refers to systems of networks, communication networks. But prior to what we're doing with Dilate Ensemble, the work would be in a room, a shared space generally, and that network of communication would involve multiple feedback networks with speakers and microphones, and then a computer in the middle of that feedback loop, if you will. But a key component of that network was the air in the room that would connect the sound from a speaker to what was being captured by the microphone and everything in the room that happens. And so what we're doing with this piece in particular is inserting the internet into that system and distributing those different nodes around the world, and inserting an awful lot of latency, awful lot of variability, surprises that the internet has a way of introducing. Sometimes unwanted surprises, but that's impacted our aesthetic, I think, in a way that's also been really kind of refreshing and interesting.
I think I'll add to that. Is that okay?
No,
Yes.
So for me, it's a bit of both, Sarah. It's like, it's absolutely connected to the work I've been doing for the last 20 years. Like the playing with time and space, the spatial nature of my installations already is a kind of unique sense of space. And I've often used live feed cameras to bring in dancers from so a localized sort of networking sort of thing. So what I'm discovering and thinking a lot about right now is how my work is being extended by the inclusion of remote presence and remote performers. And it feels like a natural extension. And so what are aspects where I can push it even further? And then the other idea that I'm playing with is just how the installation becomes this site of convergence for network performance. So it's like this other space that we can all sort of move around in and explore. So it's similar to how Scott's ecosystem is a convergence of sound, and how that all goes through its, different algorithms as well as live input, so I'm really curious about how to sort of redefine the sort of the time spatial thing. Like, is it a compositing? Is it a convergence? Is it a because I think it's not just our physical definitions of those terms, just how you're redefining this idea of synchronicity, so I find that all really interesting.
So in my case, I have to say, so the way I work with sound, when I came more to the experimental music and I became more interested in sounds, especially how I work with the toy piano, with the extended soundboard of the toy piano. I always amplified, especially when I work together with electronic musicians, really tiny sounds, turning up the gain really loud, just to amplify really tiniest movements. And this is something that it's very good applicable with playing over network settings, telematic settings, because here the focus is also on the sound that goes into the microphone, and the microphone is the transmitter of sound. So of course, in other settings, for future settings, you might have more room mics, maybe a technician who handles the balance between the room mics. But generally, for me, it's a kind of extension that happened, the network technology that really just helped me connecting to other people and also getting to know other kind of or mindsets of improvisation I would not have got to know before in this Austrian European bubble I've been before this pandemic.
Again, and just briefly, like, to me, I'm going to chop on with what Carol was saying with the installation. For me, I'm always very excited about a setting, like a particular, what is the container? Like, what can be held? Like, how can your art be held in different containers? And to me, installation has been, in the past probably 5 to 8 years of my work and my work development, the most exciting container. That term is completely overused, but I'm an interdisciplinary artist, so I'm always excited when there's what is between, like what are the containers in between, like what can hold something. And I get really excited about anything that is new, that is a little different, that where people are like, what is this? Is this like music? Is this theater? Is this like, I'm excited when all the boxes can be just like broken down and nobody knows anything anymore of like, what is this? Like, is this visual art? Is this music? What's going on? That's to me the most exciting, because it's so deeply engaging, where we don't have to label anymore and we can just like live in these in-between spaces. That's been kind of the center of my work since I've been doing my work. And so this really folds into that. It's just, I never expected it. I never even thought about it, I think. So it almost opened up this whole new world of layers that is like, oh, there's another layer now that I can play with. Like, oh, there's, like I'm moving and I'm sounding, and then I'm focusing on Carol's amazing visual arts, and I'm listening to the musicians that are not even in the room with me, and I have to interact with a dancer who's in person, and I'm being projected on this wall, and it's just these like, and I only have these tiny little cameras to even see anything, and it's just so many layers to deal with that I felt, where I usually feel very comfortable with many elements being thrown at me, I was really challenged, and I was enjoying that. I'm like, oh my God, this is really challenging. This is exciting. So yeah, that's kind of a cool extension of all of that.
Great. Well, but there's so much to discuss here, and I know that we have a time frame, so I want to see if there's any questions from the audience and maybe listening, or I could certainly ask another question.
Yes,
Ellen.
Yeah, one of the things is, Sarah, when you talked about network arts and the history of network arts, I think probably what's not very clear to people listening to this is that it was basically over fiber optic research networks. And this performance with Dilate was not over a fiber optic research network. It was located in a physical space on the normal internet, which we call IPv4. So I know that there were tremendous obstacles for everyone to overcome with both sound, location, and especially video and live art. And since that was a huge factor in how this was presented, I wonder if anyone wrapping up can discuss this, because what everyone's seen is how wonderful it was, but I think what's very compelling to people who work in this field who are interested is just the ways you had to navigate through these limitations.
Yeah, Gloria and I were supposed to be on site. That didn't happen because of Omicron just hit badly. So Gloria and I had to cancel our flights, which obviously, the whole piece, we had to almost like kind of recreate the whole piece in that sense, because that was planned. Carol, Scott, Gloria, jump in.
Well, the quality of the internet connection to Counterpulse would drop precipitously at about 4 o'clock on weekdays, and then on the weekend, it just was it was astonishingly bad from early on for the whole day, and that was something that was utterly out of our control. And so we had to adjust to that reality. It's frustrating and distracting at first, but we chose to just, we had to do our work. And that's actually what I was referring to when I said that the sort of these obstacles are things that the internet surprises us with. Really pushes our aesthetic in a certain way. And so an awful lot of the sound world that we end up working with is involving glitches and pops and clicks and percussive things that are, from a certain perspective, asynchronous. But that material was often embedded just in the network itself. It was going to be there regardless of our desires. And so we looked for ways to take maybe not control of it, but to at least embrace it and work with that.
And I will say, due to all the circumstances we encountered, that's how we pulled Shinichi Obakoka on board. And that's how we were able to have a live dancer and a remote dancer. And to me, the piece ended up being about exactly where we were in the pandemic. And it really made me see how the body can be both remote and live, and what an interesting thing that is within the installation, you know. So like it's something that I wish to explore a lot more of. So in some ways it was, you know, circumstances kind of, you know, made us land somewhere that was still really interesting, and that we wouldn't have been there if things could have proceeded as planned. So you roll with the punches. We had plenty of them. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for sharing such interesting thoughts today. And this video will be available as a recording for anybody who's here or wants to see it who wasn't able to be here. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing that history with all of us. It was really useful for me as somebody who wasn't aware of the kind of track record that Network Art had had to date. Also being kind of a joiner amidst the pandemic myself as an audience member. So just thank you to each and every one of the Dialate Ensemble members for not only the work you did in January, but also for what you'll continue to do in this field as you continue your collaborations with each other. And thank you for those who joined us in listening. Do you want to say anything to up, Sarah?
Thank you, and looking forward to the work ahead.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so much.
Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you.